Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's presentation, Growing Your Firm Through New Practice Niches. I'm Bill Carlino, Managing Director of Consulting Services for Transition Advisors, and I'll serve as your moderator for this afternoon's session. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Transition Advisors is a sponsor on the National Registry of CPA sponsors per the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy, or NASBA. In order to receive your 1 CPE credit for this afternoon's session, you must complete 2 requirements. One is that you participate in all 3 polling questions during the presentation. And 2, complete the online evaluation, which will be sent to you immediately after we end this afternoon. Once these requirements are met, you will receive your CPE certificate of completion within 10 working days. Another thing, please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the GoToWebinar control panel, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. The orange arrow on the top of the control panel minimizes the control panel. During the presentation, all participants are muted, but you can communicate with us via the question box toward the bottom of the control panel. Please send us any questions or comments you may have during the webinar, and time permitting, I will get to as many as I can. If not, I will be happy to take an email for those of you who are not able to get their questions answered, and I will answer.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Just type your question in the box and click send. And again, time permitting, I'll try to answer all of your questions. Just a brief look at some of our upcoming webinars, and please remember they're all complimentary. August 11th, how to structure your partnership agreement. That is a reschedule from July. August 18th, preparing your firm for an upstream merger. September 7th, we have succession planning, alternative deal structures. And on September 29th, preparing your firm to grow through M&A. For more information, we encourage you to visit our website, and which will give you a complete list of upcoming courses and sessions we teach for the remainder of 2016. A little bit about us. We are merger and transition advisors exclusively serving the accounting profession. We serve as succession consultants to the AICPA. We've supervised the closing of over 850 accounting firms. We represent the buyer, the seller. Our services include buyer-seller introductions, merger and acquisition transaction structure, document prep and review, valuation, due diligence, post-transaction, business planning, partnership agreements. We facilitate firm retreats, and we also do general consulting and coaching. For more information, again, we encourage you to visit our website or call the toll-free number at the bottom of the screen, or you can simply send me an email, and I'd be glad to supply you with any information you want. And now, on behalf of Transition Advisors, sit back and enjoy today's webinar. Let's look at today's agenda. We'll look at what are today's fastest growing client niches, how the economy has slowed down traditional, or what is commonly known as, organic growth. We'll look at how to begin a new practice area from scratch and all that's entailed. And we'll also look at some major hurdles or roadblocks firms will face while starting a new practice or client niche. First, let's take a look at the accounting profession from a 30,000-foot view. The revenue for the entire accounting profession, and that includes everything from the big 4 firms all the way down to the sole practitioner, is just shy of $100 billion. The number of firms throughout the country, again, going from the big 4 to the sole practitioner, is just over 94,000, and that's obviously an estimate. Employment, there are well over 500,000 people employed in public accounting only. That figure does not include those who are in private industry. And the growth in 2015, which certainly was a positive, was just shy of 10% for the top 100. And overall, from 2011 to 2016, it's anywhere from 4 to 7%, which is certainly encouraging considering that 2011 was sort of on the tail end of the recession, which really walloped the accounting profession a few years earlier. As I mentioned at the outset, there are 3 ways to grow. just like our little friend here, nurturing the tree, and organic, and that's one client at a time, and that is certainly the most time-proven and time-tested way of growing. But with the economy, as I mentioned a few slides back, it's made that a little more difficult. The growth rate is not as quick. Then, of course, there's M&A, which we'll address just a little bit later in today's presentation, and the factors behind that. Or there's adding new practice niches. So basically, that's a three-prong approach on how to grow your firm. A function of client demand, let me explain a little bit about this. The client base today is a lot more knowledgeable and sophisticated than it was, say, 2 decades ago. They're asking their CPAs to do more, and firms need to respond to that. As I mentioned, you have a much more sophisticated client base. Firms are looking to leverage their core strengths and also offer specialized niche services. And we'll go into how to distinguish yourself from your competitors with regard to offering specialized niche services. To help both a firm, according to the AICPA, the more services a firm offers a client, the less likely they are to leave. So if you have a 1040 tax client, and that's all you supply, and your competitor may offer 1040 services, maybe wealth management and lit support, there's a good chance that that client will either leave you, or if he's already with that firm, the less chance he or she has to leave, because it's more difficult to find a firm that offers more than one service. And we're going to explore that a little bit later. Let's look at the evolution of client niche services. It's become a much more strategy-driven approach as opposed to service. It's become more analytical. And by that I mean CPA firms are helping drive client businesses where they want to be in lieu of businesses taking them where they don't want to be. The decision making is becoming faster. It's becoming more a flatter organization. Again, we'll go into that. The role of the CPA firm managing partner has become more of a chief executive role. And if you check out the websites of many of the, especially the larger firms, they're identifying what were previously their managing partners as their chief executives. So they're thinking of more of a traditional business model than perhaps the accounting firm of, say, 1980, 1990. Let's look at some of the niche services that are really growing. And bear with me. Okay, attest services. And this is according to the top 100 firms who have experienced growth in these areas. The attest function, followed by business valuations, SALT, or state and local taxes, estate and trust planning, international tax, which has become a huge area. In fact, we have several clients who are looking to merge with international firms who specialize in international tax. Obviously, the world is getting smaller. M&A, industry specializations, and as I mentioned before, lit support, which is lit support and which is becoming a huge area for a lot of firms. And that's according to TAP. Other niches that stand out among U.S. firms, and this goes outside of the top 100, distribution, IT consulting, and we're going to show a few examples of that later on in the presentation of just how big IT consulting has become, as well as software reselling. Telecommunications, media, entertainment and hospitality, manufacturing, and BPO, which are basically outsourced CFO functions. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on this afternoon. Let's look at some of the top client categories. Manufacturing, mid-sized businesses, small and mid-sized businesses, there are roughly 20 million of them in this country. Real estate, technology, wholesale distributors, professional services, such as legal firms, medical offices, dental offices, veterinary offices, and last but not least, large businesses. And that is according to our friends, again, at Accounting Today, who every year do the top 100 survey. Mergers, I told you we'd address that. We're going to go into the whys and wherefores. Merger mania continues. Look at these next couple of statistics. There are over 500 M&A transactions over the past 3 years. And those are the ones that are just recorded either in the consumer press or the business press, publications or local business journals. Some of the smaller deals probably went under the radar, weren't even recorded, like maybe the 1 or 2 person firms that merged. But you have 500 plus M&A deals over the past 3 years. 3 years ago, and look at this next one, 55, over half of the top 100 firms in this country reported doing at least one merger. And as you can see, in 2015, the Big Four did 8 mergers, while the G400, which encompasses the 400 largest firms in the country, did a total of 56. That was in 2015. What we're seeing also, mergers, what we call like disciplinary transactions. And by that I mean CPA firms not necessarily merging with CPA firms, but other professional service and consulting firms. Here's a couple of examples that have occurred recently. Crowe Horwath acquired Baxter Bruce, which is a London-based insurance consulting company. Whitley, a firm many of you are probably familiar with, they're based in the Midwest, very, very strong in technology. They merged in an IT consultant and software reseller in Reston, Virginia called Brittenford Systems. Mazars, obviously one of the top 100 firms, acquired something called Corality Financial Group, which is a financial modeling consulting and training course provider. And you can see Ernst & Young acquired basically a consulting company last year, I believe, called the Parthenon Group. Friedman, a New York-based top 100 firm, acquired a turnaround firm called Sounding Board. And Citrin Cooperman, another top 100 firm, which does a lot of M&A, acquired something called Real Time Computer Services, which is an IT consulting company. So you can see there are not only CPA firms merging with CPA firms, but they're sort of expanding their services to their clients, which obviously ties in with today's topic. Let's look at the reasons behind the surge in M&A. Obviously, geography and new markets. Maybe it's not necessarily pure growth, but they want to expand in other areas where they aren't. For example, we have many clients in the Northeast who have come to us and said, we'd like to look for a merger partner in Florida, or we'd like to look for a merger partner in Chicago or Los Angeles. So they're spreading out their footprint in different markets, perhaps not the ones that they're currently in. New niches. Obviously, if you're a pure tax firm and you're looking to perhaps add wealth management, and we'll address the explosive growth of wealth management just a little bit later. Perhaps you're looking at a wealth management firm, or want to add wealth management as your new niche. And we'll go on how to do that. Competition since the recession has become increased incredibly, which has caused a lot of fee pressure among firms. Perhaps larger firms are now bidding for clients that maybe they didn't 10 years ago. Maybe they thought it was below their tier, but now the competition has increased markedly. And sadly, the last one is lack of a formal succession plan, which obviously as succession and transition advisors, we run into a lot. In fact, I believe the AICPA put out a statistic not so long ago that 70% of firms with 15 or less people in this country have no formal succession or any kind of succession plan in place. So you can see there's a dire need to either merge, or if they can't find a merger partner, unfortunately, once their partners retire, they have no choice but to lock up and shut off the lights. Neither one is a very good option. Okay. We come to our first polling question of the afternoon, and as I said at the outset, we have 3 of them, and you need to answer every one of them in order to qualify for your 1 hour of CPE credit. And the first question is, how many equity partners do you have in your firm? 1, 2 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 19, or 20 plus? And I'll ask the administrator to open up the polls, and we'll give everyone a few seconds to weigh in. Give you a few more seconds. Okay, can I ask the organizer to close the polls and show the audience the results? Okay, thank you. And let's move on. What's keeping practitioners up at night? Just like our little friend here who obviously has insomnia, finding and retaining qualified staff gets key. I can't tell you how many phone calls we get looking for people looking for young talent. Unfortunately, executive recruiting is not something that we do, but it shows you what a dire need they have for it in the profession. Succession planning, which we addressed. New business development. Years ago, who was in charge of new business development for firms? It fell upon the managing partner. But oftentimes the managing partner had his own book of business, and also he or she was not necessarily trained in business development or marketing. So right there, you had a two-pronged opposition to this. Firms, they need to expand beyond traditional services, which is what we're going to address. Stay competitive, boutique offerings, and other distinguishing services. Again, clients demanding more interaction and personal service from their CPA, more sophisticated. Clients feel their CPA does not provide enough personal attention. And that's one of the unintended consequences of technology. And what I mean by that is you may email your clients frequently, may even speak to them several times a week, but how many times are they actually in your office on a face-to-face basis? For most practitioners in this country, they meet with the majority of their client base once a year, and that's during tax season. So unfortunately, while technology has been, an incalculable boon to the accounting profession, it's also sort of detracted from that personal contact and that personal service and attention. That was then, this is now. Now we addressed the crash of 2008 a little bit earlier, but I just want to kind of go through it. Before the economy crashed, there was plenty of business to go around, and many of you will remember that circa 2007, 2008, a lot of CPAs basically became order takers. Now, as I mentioned, the traditional work is more competitively bid. Many of the 10 and 20 person firms are competing against larger firms for client business. Maybe they wouldn't have done that prior to the recession. Lowballing, unfortunately, came into prominence where the lowest price and not the best client service started to win out. And that's what I would like to call a race to the bottom. However, firms with strong niche capabilities have a lot more negotiating power when it comes to that. This is one of my favorite firms. This is not your father's CPA firm. You remember that commercial a number of years ago? I believe it was Oldsmobile, not your father's Oldsmobile. This is not your father's CPA firm. You can't run a successful CPA firm in 2016 like you did in 1980. And I don't want to get off the subject, but I can't tell you how many firms I visit that do exactly that. Gradual move we're seeing toward value pricing and value billing, not a new concept, but the last couple of years starting to gain a lot of traction. Now about 10 to 15% of firms now use some form of value pricing and value billing. We use it here at our firm when it comes to our consulting services. Firms moving to a one partner, one firm concept rather than individual books of business or what we call eat what you kill. And we're seeing that especially among partner loyal firms versus brand loyal practices. And what I mean by that is for the smaller firms, many times they have their clients because of the partner. They have a good personal relationship with their clients. Whereas somebody who may use a big four firm, say a KPMG or an E&Y, they will rarely ever interact with the partner on their engagement. They just happen to be brand loyal to KPMG, E&Y, or PwC. But the smaller firms, particularly those probably listening today, you have your clients because of you. That's what we call partner loyal. Remote workers, again, that's a consequence of technology. In 1995, surprisingly, there were almost 10 million remote workers. I was surprised when I heard that statistic. I didn't think there were that many. There were 13.5 million by 2012, and by the end of 2016, according to Gartner Research, which is a big technology research firm many of you might be familiar with, they estimate some 60 million people will work at least one day a week remotely. We're seeing a greater use, obviously, of mobile devices. More than 90% of CPA firms use smartphones or tablets. I think that is a rather conservative estimate. I'm sure all of you listening today have both a smartphone and a tablet, either or both. And that's all what we've given rise to the birth of what we call a virtual firm, which exists solely online. Today, about 10 to 15%, according to the AICPA, of all startup firms are virtual. And the beauty of that is they don't have the overhead fixed costs of a traditional firm. They don't have to worry about bricks and mortar or air conditioning or whatever. For instance, my neighborhood Starbucks, I see 10 to 20 people there each day doing financial work. I'm sure they're doing some kind of accounting work. They have their own business that they practice in a Starbucks. So you can see how that's sort of blossomed. Bring in new clients, and we're going to tie this all together. AICPA recently polled nearly 600 firms in 5 size classes, going from sole pracs to firms with over 20 professionals. And bringing in new clients ranked as the #1 concern in 3 of the 5 firm size classes, and no lower than 3rd among any of the groups. So you can see what a huge concern new business is. It's incredible, bringing in new clients and business development, which is how we're going to circle back. Let's look at some recent trends. You know, there's both ends of the extreme. A couple of years ago, prior to the recession, see, a lot of CPA firms started offering, you know, probably 10 to 20 services. We used to joke that they were trying to be their clients' most trusted Costco. But you can't be all things to all people, and unfortunately a lot of firms learn that the hard way. So basically my advice is to do 4 or 5 things very well instead of 10 things mediocre. If you ever want to take a look at some of your competitors' websites, sometimes they often highlight as many as 15 different client services, which is a lot. But look how many of those, or check out how many of those client services actually have a partner in charge. I recently did a poll, my own personal poll, and less than half had a partner in charge of some of those services. And what happens with something like that is the worst case scenario, and that's basically over-promising and under-delivering. So again, it's best to remember, if you do 4 or 5 things very, very well and 10 things mediocre, that could be a defining difference. Due diligence. All right, now we're getting to the meat of the subject. Define the niche you want to be in, obviously. Identify key drivers in the service lines and then beginning interacting that market to make a determination of whether that's a viable market for you guys. It may not be, it may be. Outline how the firm and potential clients of that service will find each other. So for instance, if you're doing a lot of tax work, wealth management would be a natural segue. So they would find each other. Or if you do you do a lot of construction companies, that would, you know, you probably could find a lot of clients who would welcome cost segregation. So you have to outline how the firm and that potential clients of that niche will find each other. Because if you start a niche and nobody wants it, that doesn't really do anybody any good. And then determine, very important, determine the channels of distribution. Okay. Again, due diligence. There are 3 critical questions you need to answer. How well is your firm aligned with the niche you're targeting? Again, I bring the tax and wealth management. What are, if any, are the current trends in that industry or niche? And then we'll get to all of that with number 4. How well is that niche doing? Obviously, if you're going into typewriter repair, that's probably not a niche you want to be in. Or printing ink. How about how well is it doing currently? How about the track record over the past 3 years? And then there's something called the research call. And the research call is probably one of the more critical strategies that you have to use. And here's how it works. You define a niche that you want to be in. Say, for argument's sake, say it's construction. So what you do is just pick up the phone. Call one of the big construction companies in your area. Ask for the CEO, the top person. Introduce yourself. Tell them what you're trying to do. Say, look, I'm interested in the construction industry and I'd like to know some of the trends. Never, it's critical to remember, never ask them for business. It's just a research call. And that's exactly what it is. And believe me, people love to talk about themselves, about their business, how well they're doing. Ask them all those questions that I've outlined here. The current trends, what are some of the pitfalls? So I can't overemphasize the importance of the research call. That's going to be key in your quest to start a new client niche. Okay, some more questions, some more due diligence. Is the niche underserved in your practice area? So, for instance, if you're in Miami or Florida, and we'll get in auto dealerships. There's a ton of auto dealerships, but there are also a lot of firms that service that. Same with in the Midwest with the franchise business. And I'm going to answer. Somebody had asked me a question prior to the start of this thing about getting into the franchise business, and if time permitting, I'm going to address that at the end. Is that niche underserved in your practice? Because if it isn't, if there's a lot of competitors in there, that's probably not a niche you want to wade into, especially if you're not that experienced. Does it have good growth potential? Do you already have clients in that niche and may not know it? And I'm going to point to an example a little later on about a client base that a firm had no idea it had so many of them, and how they tied that in with a channel referral. You'll see that. Ask yourself, do you have clients in that niche? Who will be the champion in your firm? Okay? Now, you need to have somebody take the lead when it comes to starting a new niche. And you have to have partner buy-in. Without partner buy-in, it's really not worth it. I remember, for those of you who don't know, I edited Accounting Today for 12 years, and I remember writing a story on a firm that had, after so many years, had suddenly gone paperless. And the managing partner confided in me and told me it took him 6 years to get partner buy-in to go paperless. Now, going paperless should be sort of a no-brainer, in my opinion, for an accounting firm, but it took them 6 years just to go paperless. So if you don't have total partner buy-in in starting a new client niche, look at the problems they had with something that should have been a shoe-in in going paperless. So you need complete partner buy-in. And how do you market these services to the new and existing client niches? Are you going to through referrals? Are you going to go through higher up public relations? Are you going to send out a newsletter? Marketing is critical. Let's look at some of the advantages of offering new and unique client niches. It forges a competitive point of difference. As I mentioned at the outset, if firm A offers tax and audit and firm B offers tax, audit, wealth management, and IT consulting, and I'm a potential client who needs help in all those areas, which firm do you think I'm going to go to? Obviously I'm going to go to firm B. What it also does is positions your firm as experts in that crowded marketplace. Oh, firm A, they're really good at IT consulting. So you're generally acclaimed as an expert. The next one, it increases your client focus and needs. The clients want to know, can you help them with a problem? You become a problem solver as well, not just someone who provides financial services. And specialty firms can often get more specific than what we call generalist practices. Again, don't be like most firms. Let's look at some of the caution flags, like our friend here at the bottom. Okay. Creating a niche without the necessarily ancillary support. And by that I mean referral sources, billings. You just can't start from scratch and say, okay, yeah, now we're experts in lead support or valuation. I want to make more money. Yes, obviously you want to make more money, but that should not be the sole reason that you're starting a client niche, because there's so much more involved. You want to make more money, you want to increase your billings, have your staff go through sales training. It's going to be a lot less expensive, and you're going to have a lot less headaches if that's the only goal of it. If you don't have the intellectual capital or a growth strategy, all right, we started wealth management, now what? All right, then you need to do a sort of a top-down or holistic assessment of your in-house talent. You know, who can handle this? Who can handle this? Who shouldn't be involved with it? Who should be involved with it? And perhaps most importantly, don't ignore your core strength. Say tax and audit brought you to the dance. Don't abandon it. You know, your focus on that to concentrate on the new areas. Yes, the new areas are going to command a significant portion of your attention, but you can't abandon what made your firm strong in the first place. So that's a caution flag. Don't ignore your core strengths by any means. Now we come to our second polling question of the day. What issues do you see affecting your practice the most during the next year? Succession for retiring partners, admitting new partners, client retention for retiring partners, need for growth, or all of the above. And could I ask the administrator to open up the polls? And we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to fill in their answers. Just a few more seconds. Okay, can I ask the administrator to close the polls and share the results with our audience? Okay, give everyone a few seconds to soak in the answers. Okay, let's move on. All right, now we come to the core of it. How to begin a niche practice. Determine the client need. Will there be cross-selling opportunities? Again, for example, if you choose wealth to start a wealth management practice with your tax clients. I mean, you should have, that should be a natural segue, a natural cross-selling opportunity. Same with perhaps cost segregation construction clients. If you handle estate, perhaps litigation support. If you're an expert witness, develop a market-based approach. Is there an opportunity in your client base? Because if there's not, it's just you're banging your head against the wall. You're treading water. It's not going to do your firm any good. You're just going to be siphoning needed capital and man hours. Developing the expertise. Do you build it? Now here's a question. Here's one of the more critical questions. Do you build the expertise in-house or through an acquisition? And you have to weigh the pros and cons of each. Many firms that we work with have started client niches by either poaching, and I don't really like to use that word, but basically that's it, or they've hired away a specialist from another firm in that area to help them, or they've trained their in-house person. Say, again, I'll harp on wealth management because it's probably the easiest example. Get them licensed with a Series 7, Series 63, Series 66, or insurance. That way they'll do it in-house. They've licensed their people. Or through an outright acquisition. You know, do we acquire a firm that specializes in litigation support or some other unique client niche that we'd like to get into? So there's a lot of, there's no blanket answer for that. A lot of it is on a case-by-case basis, so that's what you have to do with regarding that. But either way, you have to develop the expertise because, like I said, one of the cardinal sins is over-promising and under-delivering. So if you offer cost segregation, trust me, a construction client's going to know if you guys aren't very good at it. So again, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. Moving on. Develop this is a little more technical now. Develop your pricing and profitability model. Understand the key financial indicators of that segment that will help steer sales and marketing strategies. And whatever field you go into, obviously they have their own KPIs or key performance indicators that are indigenous to those areas. Determine your go-to-market strategy. Identify your sales teams, both primary and secondary. Develop your marketing and sales materials, whether you do that in-house or you hire an agency outside to do it. We have clients who have done both. Internal service education, your pipeline and your sales process. Identify the primary influencers and potential referral sources. And I'm going to go into one which to show you how one firm did this with regard to channel referrals. Do your PR and launch your communications effort. Let everyone know that you now have a client niche. Maybe many of you already have a firm newsletter that you send out regularly to clients. Obviously, promote it on that, or to an email blast or something. But let the clients know that you're either started or now that you've established one. Let's look at wealth management. It's estimated that over 100,000 CPAs perform some type of financial planning and wealth management. Now, that can go from very complex planning to referrals to third parties. So, but 100,000 CPAs perform some type. It's a natural segue, as I've mentioned several times during this, but you're already handling a client's sensitive financial information, their tax information. So it should be a natural step up. You either do that obviously through referrals, do you get your staff license, as I mentioned before, or do you establish what we call an RIA? Now, if you opt for the RIA, there are obviously regulatory guidelines that you have to follow. It's a little more complex, but whichever way you choose, I just want to show you some of the firms that are actively involved in wealth management and the kind of colossal numbers that are associated with their assets under management. Plant Moran, a firm many of you are familiar with, out in the Midwest, they have over $12 billion in assets under management. Let me repeat that, $12 billion. Ronald Blue and Company, $8 billion. My CIO Wealth Partners, which is a division of one of the big firms, $6.5 billion. RSM, another firm many of you might be familiar with, wealth management, over $5 billion. Clifton Larson Allen, the huge firm in the Midwest, their wealth advisor division oversees over $4 billion in assets under management. Now, many of you are smaller firms, and obviously those numbers would be unrealistic, but there's still a lot of potential to handle your client's wealth management. Software reselling, I mentioned that, IT consulting. Let's take a look at what some of these firms are doing. RSM McGladrey, US, they resell Microsoft, they resell Dynamics, Great Plains, NetSuite. That division generates $229 million in revenue. TriBridge, now these all have to be either direct part of a CPA firm or a division of a CPA firm with a CPA running it to qualify for this list. TriBridge, and you see what they resell, they're at $140 million. Crowe Horwath, a firm we mentioned earlier in the presentation, reselling Dynamics, Exapta, and Great Plains, $82 million. Armanino, a very, very progressive firm out in the Bay Area. We're going to look at another one of the client niches that they started this year in a short time. They resell Dynamics and Intact. They make $69 million on that division. Columbus, $65 million. Sikich, another firm in the Chicago area that's very, very active in M&A, but they have branched out into all sorts of areas. They make their software reselling division makes $48 million. Wipfli, a firm that we saw a presentation from based in Wisconsin, their VAR division makes $34 million, generates $34 million, and BKD, another firm in the Midwest, $19 million, and I.D. Bailey, a firm in the Great Plains. And you can see some of these numbers here, just from software reselling and consulting and installation. Let's look at some firms with examples of successful niche practices. Okay. Now, Armanino McKenna, the corporate finance practice to clients, they just last year they launched this intellectual property and patent sales through a structured process called Auction 90. It completes competitive auction within 90 days. Other services include sell-side representation. So it's a whole financial model that they offer their clients. Cohn Resnick, a big firm out here in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, they just recently they launched something called an innovation lab, where it's a client service where the firm collaborates with clients on problem solving and brainstorming, no matter what area, and they use this new technology that provides state-of-the-art LCD or liquid crystal display screen visuals to help them through that. We mentioned auto dealerships. MBAF down in Miami. Since 1972, this firm has had an auto dealership unit, and it is so well entrenched in that area that they author the Auto Dealership Engagement Manual published annually by the AICPA. And finally, in sort of an unusual one, there's a practitioner out in Montana named Joseph Eve who specializes solely in Indian reservations. Now that's pretty specialized, but that just shows you the sort of the wide scope of client niche, of interesting client niches or inventive client niches. Let's look at some of the factors. A niche success is a combination of market conditions and, as I mentioned before, a committed leader. Again, don't relegate your established offerings such as tax and audit to the back burner. You need to fire on all cylinders. I explained the danger associated with that. Strategy development consists of three dynamics: services, channel and distribution, and targets. This involves the selection, innovation, and packaging. Okay, don't forget to network. Business valuations, litigation support, two of the client niches that I had mentioned a number of times. Interact with legal associations, perhaps divorce attorneys. Restaurants, which many firms in the country specialize in. Every state has a state restaurant association or food service member association. Again, those would be, if you're thinking of getting into that business, the State Restaurant Association, the trade organization for each state knows what's going on in that state within the restaurant. That's their job. So they would be perfect for the research call that I had mentioned earlier. Cost segregation, builders groups or related associations. Channels in lieu of referrals, and here's what I mean. New growth is often a case of strategic matchmaking. All right, an example of one firm wanted to boost their wealth management. They discovered they had a large segment of widows in need of financial planning. So what did they do? They partnered with local church groups that the widows attended and offered it through that, which is a very ingenious way of doing that. So that's what I was talking about. Know your client base. They had no idea that they had such a large segment of widows. So sometimes it pays to just sort of comb through your client base and find out where the growth is. Hit the ground running. Again, find that niche leader within your firm or go out and get him or her. Champions, niche champions, should be equal parts analytical, strategy, and above all, are capable of leading the growth of that segment. Assign practical revenue and growth metrics to the new undertaking. Don't play catch as catch can. Be practical. Don't launch, a new client niche such as wealth management. Say, yeah, we're going to make $20 million the first year. That's probably not a practical revenue number. So, sort of discuss that. Maybe look at other examples of other firms who have done it. Again, there are financial associations that you could probably call. Remember, smart money is on specialization, not generalization. As I mentioned before at the outlet, you can't be all things to all people. And we come to our final polling question of the day. Do you have adequate talent on your bench to replace retiring partners? No, we don't have the talent we need. I think so, but we don't know how to add them. Admit them, I should say, I'm sorry. Yes, we're confident in our approach, and we don't plan to pursue internal succession. I would ask the organizer to open up the poll, and we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to fill in. A couple more. And okay, can I ask the organizer to close the polls now, and share the results with our audience? And that will be the final polling question of today. And as I mentioned at the outset, you need to have answered all three, as well as the online evaluation that will be sent immediately after the presentation. Okay, let's move on as we're nearing the top of the hour. Remember, niche specialties are a value proposition. Most firms offer traditional tax and accounting services. Don't be like most firms. Client and market will perceive you as an expert, and we addressed that before. Firms that complement those client niches with specialization will ultimately win client engagements. Let's look at today's takeaways, and then we'll get to some questions. One, obviously determine your need. Use a market-based strategy, not an idea-based strategy. Look both inside and outside for niche specialists. Again, I can't stress this enough. Find the champion in your firm. He or she is there. If not, you need to go get them. And most of all, remember the 7 Ps, one of my favorite slides. Proper prior planning prevents piss-poor performance. And for more information, you could visit the AICPA Succession Planning Resource Center. You could see we're listed there. Our president, Joel Sinkin, hosts something called Succession Corner. And we invite you to join our website for resources, including free reports. There's my email address. Feel free to contact me or simply go to our website. And now I see we have some time, and I'll take a question. And this one comes from Kerry, all right? And Kerry's question is, we're thinking of specializing in franchises. How would one go about that? Kerry, that's an excellent question. As it happens, one that I answered to a client just this week. Franchising, obviously, is unquestionably a huge field with a lot of opportunities. According to the International Franchise Association, which is the trade organization, there are over 700,000 franchises in the U.S., and that includes everything from ones we're familiar with, such as fast food, tire and automotive dealerships, to such arcane areas that I didn't even know existed, such as trampoline parks. Yes, they actually have franchises for trampoline parks. We have a number of CPA firm clients who specialize in that area. One client we have in the Midwest handles about 200 pizza franchises of a national brand, but confidentiality precludes me from mentioning it. And another one oversees some 300 licensees of a retail chain. Now, most of the work the clients perform for their franchisees, at least our clients, is what you saw earlier in the growth niches, the BPO or the business process outsourcing. Basically, it's back office. They serve as the outsourced CFO for these companies. But you have to get your foot in the door. I would first perform a market study in your area. Take note of how many businesses in the area are franchised. If you're in a rural area with not a lot of businesses, it might not be good to get into, but although with technology, outsourced CFO work can pretty much be performed anywhere. As I mentioned, all those folks in Starbucks performing, financial services. Then I would embark on the research call. First call the trade association, the IFA, and perhaps attend as many there's a number of franchise expos and trade shows throughout the country throughout the year, and get an idea of what that business is all about. But remember, a franchisee is a little unique. They are their own boss to a point, but they also have to answer to the franchisor. For example, a McDonald's franchisee has to go through McDonald's Corp for such things as procurement, where they buy their supplies, and oftentimes that might even stretch into approval of accounting firms. So again, there's no blanket answer for that. You need to take it on a case-by-case basis. But certainly an area that is not only growing, but certainly needs accounting services. And I see that we are past the hour, and there are no more questions. If anybody has anyone, just email me. I will be more than happy to answer your question regarding starting new client niches. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time from your busy day to spend an hour with us. You will receive, again, you will receive an online evaluation form. Please fill it out, and then within 10 working days, you'll get your CPE certificate. Once again, I'm Bill Carlino, Managing Director of Consulting Services for Transition Advisors. And have a great afternoon, and hope to meet up with you again at one of our upcoming webinars. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.